So, hey guys, thank you so much for joining us today. I have the pleasure of having Catherine Burton here. And so some of you guys might have seen my interview with the experts. I don't know if I'll call them episodes, but I'll call them episodes. How about that? My interview with the expert episodes before. Some of you may have not, but what I like to do, I like to bring in professionals, experts from other areas of life that I know that there are a lot or a certain percentage of my clientele in estate planning will be interested in. And sometimes these are experts that really closely overlap with what I'm doing. It could be a Medicaid expert or maybe a tax expert. And then sometimes we find experts to come in to talk about things that are not maybe directly related to my estate planning practice, but are things that they have information, they have an expertise that impacts a lot of people, a lot of families, and they have a lot of good information. So that's why we have Catherine here today. So thanks for joining us, Catherine. Okay, so I'm going to let Catherine, I want you to tell them what it is that you do as a professional and kind of your professional background in terms of your experience and your licensing.
Okay, well, I have been in practice 25 years in Southlake, and I'm a licensed professional counselor as well as a licensed marriage and family therapist. And I have a private practice, as I said, 25 years here in Southlake.
Okay, and so, and Catherine, when it comes to your practice, you've worked with families, correct?
Yes.
You've worked with couples, is that right?
Yes.
And you've worked with individuals.
Yes.
Okay, so guys, this is something that can apply if there's issues within a family. It could be parents and children. It could be spouses having problems with communication. Or it could just be an individual having some problems that they feel they need to kind of work out on their own. But Catherine, why don't you tell us what is some of one of the biggest problems that you see when it comes to, let's start with families or couples.
Okay.
When it comes to families, when it comes to couples who things have gotten to the point that they feel like they need to come see you, right? I mean, that's probably pretty serious, number one, right?
Right.
That's a big step, you know. What's kind of the number one problem that you see with these couples or with these families?
Yeah. Well, when somebody comes in, one of the first things I'll ask them is, what are your goals? What do you want to achieve? And the first thing people tell me is about 100% of the time is, we can't communicate. We need to learn how to communicate. And actually, when people can't communicate with another person, you always have an interaction that's conflicted. So if you can learn communication skills, you have so much more of an advantage in a relationship, whether it's personal or whether it's business or anything else. Learning good communication skills is absolutely the number one criteria. And because what people complain about the most is their point of greatest need. So when I hear what the need is, and my people tell me 100% of the time it's communication. And why is that? If you can't communication, how are you going to resolve conflict? How are you going to set boundaries? How are you going to process feelings? How are you going to do anything? It's like a hierarchy. It starts in the first grade. We learn to communicate. Then we learn more advanced skills as we go along.
Okay. And let's talk about emotional content and how big of an impact that has on communication.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is something that most is not really out there in the public right now. People don't understand that every time you have an interaction with a person, there's an emotional content that's going on as well. It's not just an intellectual process, it's an emotional process. And when we feel comfortable with someone, we're free to open. We feel confident and secure in sharing. When we feel threatened or we feel confused or attacked, we feel we shut down, we avoid them, and we resist.
Okay, and let's talk about this. Let's maybe talk now about the standpoint of a husband and a wife. Mm-hmm. And you have a husband and a wife, and maybe it's been a multi-year, maybe even multi-decade marriage. Mm-hmm. And they're having clear communication problems, and maybe the wife is saying something to the effect of, he doesn't communicate with me, he doesn't communicate well. Maybe the husband feels, I don't like the way my wife communicates with me, not saying she doesn't communicate, but I don't like the way she does it. and she's saying, well, he doesn't communicate well at all. What are kind of the steps and the principles that you will walk that couple through to help them start to resolve that so that they can both start communicating better with one another? What does that look like?
Yeah. Well, what it looks like is first, when you see people, particularly those who've been married for a while, what happens is you build up a lot of unresolved conflicts over the years and months, things that were never addressed, things that were never resolved. And so people have a lot of emotions around certain hot topics. And when those topics are brought up, a person just emotionally goes into a reaction. So that shuts down communication. You can't have good communication when you have a lot of emotion in the conversation. So what would I say? I would look at somebody and say, okay, what are your issues? What is it did you have these emotional reactions to that you can't get resolved? So we'd sit and I'd find out, see, I want to go with goals. Everybody's different, and I don't want to take somebody off on a different direction if that's not their goal. So we talk about what is your goal? And we sit down and we say, there's always an emotional reaction, I'm going to teach you how to resolve emotions in a conversation.
Okay.
How do we do it? I've got some ideas on that too. If you want to, because
yes.
we work very.
How do we do that?
Yes,
If you're sitting down with a couple and trying to get them to help them not only in the moment, but also so that when they go home and they're not in your office, they have some things to work on. What are those kind of devices that you teach them?
Yeah. Well, the first thing we have to do is get people communicating in a productive manner, because you can never get conflict resolution when people can't communicate in a productive manner. So what the first thing I do is get into the emotions. What is the feeling that's going along with this? What is the feeling that is attached to this issue? And it may be anger, it may be sadness, it may be resentment, frustration, all kinds of things that are emotionally affect that person. So we get them into the emotions and we put words on feelings, and then I'll tell the other person, what are you hearing her say? What are you hearing him say? He has to use a reflection. A reflection is very important in getting people in sync, because you say something and I hear something different. And why is that? Why is that? Because you know the 7%, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
Because 7% of the message you get when someone is speaking does not come from words. 55% comes from facial expressions and nonverbal cues. 38% comes from tone of voice and volume of speech. So it's very easy for two people to talk, and one hears one thing and the other hears something else. Now they're off in different directions. So we have to get people directed. What did you hear? What did you hear her say? And they have to reflect it back. If it's wrong, say, no, that's not what I said. So, and then we have to go and can you validate that feeling? Now, people don't validate behavior, but we can validate feeling. Can you understand that that person's hurt, that that person felt put down, or that person feels sad and angry? Yes, most people can understand and validate. We can validate feelings. We can't always validate behavior. Number 3, I'm going to go another step and I'm going to say, can you empathize with that? Can you put yourself in their position just for a moment? Can you put yourself, what would be that like for you if you were in that situation? Most people, we can always empathize with someone else because we've probably been there ourselves one way or the other. And then we want to make an apology and say, I'm sorry that you're going through this. And then we're going to say, what do you need from me? Now, here's our solution focus. Once I've been through all this and gotten you calmed down and your emotions settled down, then I can ask you, I can go into your executive functions in your prefrontal cortex brain, in your thinking brain, and say, what do you want to do about it? What do you need from me? How can we fix it? Now, you see, it's a hierarchy of steps that you go through. But first, you bring down the emotional content. You're not going to get anywhere when people come in with a lot of unresolved emotion against you, towards you, or something you did that you didn't even realize hurt their feelings. So we've got to get that out of the way first. Get the emotional content out of the way. Now we're going to get to the solution. What do you need?
Okay, that's great. That's great information. And so, also, when it comes to if you have somebody who comes into your office and then you feel that maybe they're not doing a good enough job articulating their needs and their wants in a relationship, how do you advise them to do a better job communicating with their spouse the needs and the wants that they have within that relationship?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that people tend to do is complain about what they're not getting and about what's wrong. This is wrong, I don't like this, and he didn't do this, or she isn't always that way, and then we hear all this complaining and griping and moaning. And what I try to do is say, okay, I understand that. What do you want to do about it? let's get, what do you need? Let's get a positive focus. Instead of saying, this is not what I don't have, let's say what I would like to have is X, Y, Z. What I would like for you to do is X, Y, Z instead. Instead of complaining and putting that person down and attacking them, that person feels attacked. They're not, when you attack people, they're going to get resistant. So you want to say, what would you like to do? Instead of coming wrong, 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 say, what do you think is right? What would you want to do rather than trying to condemn?
Okay, and can you give us an example and kind of explain what this is and the value of it, of someone speaking from a positive point of view? Give us an example of that.
Well, that's a positive point of view too, is instead of making a negative complaint, say what you would like in the situation. And one of the things you want to be careful of is knowing and understanding the difference between observations and what is an observation and what is a judgment. When we judge people by their behavior, people are resistant. And so well, you just never do anything right. Well, you're just lazy. Well, you can't do anything right. Well, you know, you're just a jerk. You're just stupid. Those are judgments. And when we make judgments, people resist us. So what you want to do is you want to say, if there's something you have seen, you say, well, I observed this behavior, or that's what has been observed, or that's what people see. You want to use facts and figures. And that way a person doesn't feel personally attacked and condemned and criticized. So you use objective evidence instead of a judgment. And so that way a person doesn't feel so attacked, and they may still feel that, you know, that they may not be in the best position emotionally, but at least they don't feel attacked.
Great. Yes. Great point. And so let's talk about this. What about if somebody is applying these strategies, they're trying to do a better job of communicating, but their spouse still remains unresponsive or hostile, sort of like maybe one partner's trying to do the right thing here and the other's really not. Where do we go from there?
Yeah. Well, we see that all the time, of course. It's because honestly, random people don't have the skills, and people want to talk, and the other person has some kind of a negative narrative about that person. Like if I talk, I hear this a lot. Every time I open my mouth, she just criticizes me, so I don't talk. Or I don't talk. And why don't you talk to this to your husband? Because he always gets mad. He just yells at me. He gets mad. So that just shuts down the communication. So we learn, as I said, we have to use certain skills like putting words on feelings. Tell them what you need. Tell them what you want instead of complaining.
Okay. And would this kind of go along with staying solution focused? I mean, the things that and how important is that to stay solution focused, as opposed to just complaining about the spouse? And what are some things that go along with staying solution focused?
Well, when you stay solution focused, one of the things you want to do is you always want to stay in the now, because this is what happens too with a lot of people when they're talking. The worst thing is people go off on these hypotheticals. Well, what if this is? Well, this could happen. Well, what if this and that? And the hypotheticals will just take you down a rabbit trail. So you don't want to go down hypotheticals. And the other thing you don't want to do is go back into the past and mull over and gripe about all over past unresolved issues. So one of the things is staying solution focused. Stay in the now. What can we do about it now? What is your solution now? Let's don't go backwards. Let's don't go forward with hypotheticals. Let's say, what can we do in the present?
Okay, perfect. And I think that's great advice for whether it's your family, the workplace, anywhere, right? Social situations. Now let's talk about this is sort of an issue, or not an issue. This is sort of a term that we maybe remember from childhood or raising our children, but is sometimes even with adults, particularly with spouses, is taking a time out from the conversation, from the conflict, and that rather than just continuing at talking about it, sometimes is a timeout helpful for people?
Oh, yes. Actually, the timeout, I work on that a whole lot with my clients. Timeout is really a game changer, because when you see a conversation that's going in the wrong direction, most people just continue to beat it down, attack, defend. And when you see a discussion going in the wrong direction, the best thing to do is just say time out. That's not being disrespectful. A timeout just says, look, this isn't going in the right direction. Let's just stop, catch our breath, calm down, think about it for a little bit, and come back. Actually, the research shows that it takes 20 minutes for a person emotionally, physiologically to calm down once their blood pressure goes up and their heartbeat rate goes over 100 beats a minute. You can't process anything logically and rationally. We all know the more angry and upset you get, the more emotional you get, the more irrational you become.
Right. So, and I think, guys, you know, we can all probably relate to whether it's within our family, with our spouse, with our kids at work. You know, sometimes if you just walk away from the situation, you know, 30 minutes later, you might be thinking, well, why was I so mad about that? I mean, that's happened to me before, right? So sometimes just stepping away from a situation, I think your emotions dissipate a lot and you think logically about it. So that's great advice. And then let's kind of shift gears here a little bit and talk about something that's near and dear to my heart at this phase of my life is, let's say dealing with the teenage brain.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh boy, that's a good one.
That's the phase of life I'm in right now is I have 2 teenage boys. And so, you know, when we have, you know, the teenager who you're just like, hey, why don't you come down and eat dinner and then do your homework? And they scream, okay, and slam their door. And, you know, and like sometimes I know my wife and I lately, sometimes it depends on the mood, but sometimes we feel like just any little question we ask about their life, anything we have to say, is just sort of, it's like, it just creates this anger, right? And this just wanting to like slam the door and I'm not dealing with you people. When people are dealing with teenagers that don't want to communicate, that when they do communicate, it's fairly defiant, right? What kind of advice are you giving those parents?
Yeah. Well, first I like to say we're going to always go back to the emotional content. What are you hearing from your boys? What emotion?
Anger at the parent trying to tell them what to do, even if it's completely warranted and logical.
Yeah. And what does that tell you about the relationship between the parent?
You tell me. I don't know.
Well, I'm just saying, when somebody is defiance means
Right.
I'm angry with you. I have resentments against you. There's some misunderstandings we have. And so they're not having good feelings about you. Now we understand adolescent psychology. There's a lot of imbalances there, and they're trying to find their identity. The number one concept of adolescent psychology is identity formation. And they're trying to find their identity. Who am I? How do I fit in the world? And of course, we live in a world that's very, very scary for young people because this world is so full of all kind of unknowns that they have to learn to navigate, and they don't know how. So again, they're trying to find their identity. And when adolescents can't establish their identity throughout that term of their development, then the adults, it goes over into the adult identity where they become maybe insecure or hostile or defiant or whatever, rebellious. When they don't learn to get the identity that's appropriate, they carry it over throughout life. So what am I saying? And I understand that when you're dealing with some anger, you're dealing with hostility, when you get resistance and defiance, that's anger and hostility. There's something between the parent and the child that is not working well. And we know that there's hardly any that do work well at that stage in life. Why? Why doesn't it work well? Because parents don't know how to talk to their children. Please. I'm just telling you, this is one of the number one issues of our age. And I would certainly like to go forward with this because we need to learn how to talk to these adolescents while they're growing up, because we are putting into them all kind of messages that they will carry and endure maybe even throughout life, depending on what it is. I'm not trying to scare people, but I'm saying it's so critical that you learn how to talk to your adolescent. And so I work a lot on that in our family sessions and tell parents a lot and help them understand how to talk to adolescents. You have to understand, I work and talk to adolescents alone by themselves without their parents individually. They tell me things they don't tell their parents. Okay. So I get an understanding. And when a young person is in my practice, I'm their advocate. I'm not there to be their parent. Don't do this, don't do that, stop. I'm not there as their parent. I'm there as their advocate. What is it that their parents don't understand? What is it that's getting in the way? And you'd be surprised. they will tell me, will they tell their parents? No. I go, why'd you tell your parents? Oh, I just get mad. They think you know, they think I know more than they think I'm just being real bossy or sassy or something like that. And they're not, they're trying to talk. And it's so important. If they learn these skills in their family during adolescence, guess where they will take them? Into the real world. When you don't learn these things in your family of origin, you take them into your real world. All of the coping mechanisms that you have in adolescence and in childhood, guess what? You take into the real world. I've worked in psych hospitals. I've seen it. I know it. So I'm talking with adolescents and they tell me things. So what do I want to tell parents? I can sit here, I can tell you whatever you want. If you want to hear how to talk to them, I will tell you.
Yeah, and I wonder sometimes as parents, maybe we're like maybe their harsh tone is a result of our initial harsh tone. Whereas we think I'm being a good parent by being tough on my kid, being tough on my teenager. Like maybe verbally, if maybe we're being too tough, and that causes the teenager to have a negative reaction. Whereas if we, at least verbally, I'm not talking about not, like I'm not talking about being overly permissive, letting the kid run over you, but maybe verbally, if we came at things like with a little bit softer tone, maybe they would respond with a softer tone. Is that?
Well, it sort of depends. You have to understand about adolescents. They're exploring their world.
Right.
They want to get away from it's a time of separation, individuation from the parents. They
Right.
want to explore their world, but they want to stay connected to their safe place.
Right.
So they want to stay connected with their family, with their home.
Well, they want us to pay for everything.
Well, that's part of it. That's a lot of good. But and I know parents talk a lot about that, and of course that's what they do. They're spoiled. We all know that.
Right.
Well, we're all selfish. We always want the good things, but
Right.
and kids are no different. But I'm just saying that they are in a stage where they want to explore their world.
Okay.
And yet they want to stay connected to their family, their source of security. So parents have to allow them to explore their world to a certain extent and still stay connected to their base. So that's why it's so important that an adolescent and their parents have a good communication style relationship. And that's what I've been talking about. And a lot of it, when you're dealing with adolescents, is about emotions. They're in a very emotional stage of development. So they run by emotions. It's emotional. So when parents don't know how to regulate emotion, they don't know how to regulate their own emotion. They don't know how to regulate their child's emotion or teenager's emotion. And when you can't regulate emotions, just like what we talked about a while ago, you can't resolve conflict and you can't have a productive conversation.
Okay. Yeah, those are all great points. And then I think another thing too is I'll just give you a quick example. So a few years ago, I read this really sad story about this teenage boy in San Antonio who had committed suicide. And basically he was being picked on and bullied in high school. And what it was saying, the article, one big point of it was, it used to be like in my generation and every generation before that, if you were being bullied or picked on at school, you could leave school and get away from it, right? You could go home and go to your family and get away from it. But now what happens, so these kids are online 24/7, social media. So now, a kid who's getting bullied is not getting away from things when he goes home. He's getting bullied online when he goes home, right? People are sending messages. And then, but in general, it's like our kids have these our teenagers kind of have these like all secret worlds of, like their friends online. And I mean, even when the kids play video games, they now play online with their friends, right? And so it's like there's this whole world that we don't even know about almost that's going on with them online, in addition to the world at school where we don't really exactly know what's happening at school either because they don't always tell us. And so I think that just compounds the problem. Have you, like in the last, I don't know, 15 years with the rise of social media and teenagers being online, have you seen that as something that's caused more problems? I'm curious.
Well, of course, adolescents want to, also one of the main tasks of adolescents is they want to belong. Belonging is very important. They want to be part of a group. It's important to their self-esteem and their status. So, but first I'm going to go back and say the kind of parents I'm talking about, like Brandon, I'm sure, and many of my others, they are wonderful parents, excellent parents, loving parents, kind parents that are so invested in their kids. It's just that they don't maybe know how. So I'm not trying to condemn people or parents or anything. I know they're very good parents. They just don't know maybe how to interact with their teen. Now that situation, yes, of course. The social interaction is so important to adolescents. And when they don't get a favorable social interaction, you understand their identity is very weak. They don't know who they are yet. It's very easy to put into them some negative message, some negative narrative, and they believe it. The fat shaming or something, that if they take it to heart because they don't have good boundaries, they don't know who they are. And if I don't know who I am, you can put anything on me, and I can say, well, maybe that's right, maybe I am not, But so it is a very big issue, and I think that there's not a whole lot you can do in some situations because you can't shut it down completely. But that's why I think it's so important for the parents and the adolescents to have a good communication skills together, working together. Because I will say, could you talk to your dad about that? Could you tell your mom what's going on there? And oh no, they just they call the teacher, they'd call, the parent, other parent or something like that. Oh, I can't talk to them, I can't tell them. I said, they need to know, because perhaps they could give you some advice that would be helpful. Oh no, they can't talk to their parents, and the parents can't talk to their kids. So we're going like this all the time, and it just creates more tension. So I don't know, you can ask me if that was what you want.
Well, yeah, no, that's great. Yes, exactly. And then let's also kind of talk. So we've talked about spouses, we've talked about teenagers and parents. Let's also talk a little bit about when individuals come to see you. So I'm sure that it can be a multitude of reasons. I mean, like 1,000 different reasons an individual could come see you. But let's take kind of a common situation of somebody an adult, maybe they're married, they have a family, or maybe they're divorced, but they have kids. What are kind of some common reasons that you're seeing nowadays, adults coming to see you for individual counseling?
Well, of course, it could be side issues from issues like family or problems in the workplace, issues like that. But if it's a personal and individual issue, that what so many people come in with is this, what I call this inner critic, where they're so hostile toward themselves and they blame themselves and they have this negative narrative about themselves that maybe they've gotten from bullying in school, maybe they've gotten from parents, maybe they've gotten inadvertently from some boss or somebody they work for that's put some negativity on them. And it's very strange how people will internalize that. And the inner critic, I work very hard on that to say, that situation, 2020 hindsight is clear vision. And a lot of people will say, oh, I should have known, I should have done this differently, I should not. I said, well, yeah, you know it now, but 2 years ago, 5 months ago, you didn't have this information. So you've got to quit beating up yourself in situations that you didn't have the information at that time to deal with it. Maybe now you do, but people go back and look back and they criticize themselves about mistakes that they made months ago or years ago, or somebody held them account or, blamed them for. And I have to get that out, because we take ourselves everywhere we go. And if you have a negative image of yourself, we're going to put that negative image on others. If I'm angry with myself, I'm probably being angry with you too.
Okay. And I'm curious about this. So I'm wondering, for some reason in my mind, I think this is the case, but I could totally be wrong.
Yeah.
Is a female more likely to seek help, an adult female, than a male? In my mind, I would think that is the case. Like, men are more like, we got to suck it up and just live with it.
Yeah.
And maybe a woman would go. So do you think that women are more apt to like seek help on an individual basis than a man would be for counseling?
I think probably the percentage is higher among females seeking an individual, unless men come in. The reason men come in is when they have problems with their wife or their significant other.
Okay.
That's the only reason I see men, is that their wife's about to run out the door, or
Right.
their girlfriend, fiance, whatever, significant other's about to run out the door, or they're having problems and conflicts and they're afraid they're going to lose a person. So
Okay. Otherwise, we just tell ourselves everything's fine, even if it's not. That's what we do.
But you are right. The women generally come in because women generally are more perceptive about issues and problems that could be damaging and could be problems in the future than men. Men I think they don't look at the long-term effect and impact things are having. And I've heard women men come home and say, yeah, I came home and kids were gone, she was gone, packed up and left, and never really knew it. Well, did you know she was unhappy? Oh, yeah, well, they cried, you know, I knew she was unhappy, but I didn't expect this. Well, then they get a divorce thing, you know. No, it's true. It
No, I
catches
know.
men off guard. It really catches men off guard.
No, I know, yeah.
Because they don't realize how distressed and the impact that they're having, or the relationship is having on their wife or their significant other.
Probably due to lack of communication.
Just,
right?
they're not aware.
Right.
Men are not aware of those things as much as women.
No,
They're the
sure.
nurturers, they're the nurturers.
Yeah,
I'm not
right.
doing, stereotypes.
That's why I asked the question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would assume that was the
Women
case.
are
so.
nurturers, and they're supposed to be kind of more sensitive to what's
Right.
going on and to other people's needs. Men kind of, have other.
Right. Okay, so all right. So let's talk about, you have written a book and you have written a workbook. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about that. Tell us about the name of the book that you've written, the workbook, and kind of walk us through what it's about.
Yeah. Well, I wrote the books because from my practice and from my experience, I wanted people to understand how to maneuver things themselves. The book I wrote, I've written 2 books. It's called Don't Give Up. You Can Be Your Own Therapist. And the other one is the same, exactly the same thing. Don't Give Up. You Can Be Your Own Therapist workbook. So the first book it talks about 3 very important cases that I see frequently. And I discuss those in the book. And what to do about it. How do you work through somebody, say, who's had an affair, who has boundary issues, who has depression? What do we do? And the book tells you exactly how the therapist, how I work through it, issue by issue, by step. The workbook is different. It talks about, I have so many couples that come in, they're on the edge of divorce. Their marriage is hanging by a thread. And they just feel like they want to give up. They tell me, Heather, I just can't go. I can't keep doing this. I can't go on anymore. And I think I understand you can't with that kind of a situation. It's, it's intolerable, but don't give up. And so that's the workbook. The workbook is for couples who feel like are struggling in their relationship and need some better tools and skills. So the workbook goes through that and how to help couples navigate these challenges.
Now, and this might just be in the interest of self-preservation. I would never publish a book called Don't Give Up. You Can Be Your Own Estate Planning Attorney.
I know it.
So I would never do that. So I'm very impressed that you wrote this, but I'm curious. I mean, is this something that you would recommend doing? Like, come see a therapist, see a counselor, get some help, and then this is something that they can just kind of supplement, like, so when they go home and they don't have to come see you every other day. I mean, is it something that would be kind of maybe first get some help from a professional and then follow the advice in this book? Is that kind of how you feel about it? Or?
Right. The workbook is for couples. And what I do, I have kind of a workshop that I do, a seminar that I work with couples. It's about a 10-week seminar where we learn how to communicate, we learn how to set boundaries, learn how to process feelings, as I've told you about. We learn how to resolve conflict. We understand about core values and emotional intimacy. So these are steps that we work on in my workshop that I do with my couples. And it's about giving skills. It's more than, it's not just therapy, but it's about giving you a concrete and practical skills that you can use. And that's what's in the workbook. So we talk about that in the session, and you have to buy the workbook, and then they can fill it in. There's all kinds of questions and answers there. And that kind of keeps them motivated through the 10-week course. And it's been so effective, really it has. And that's why I've written the workbook, because it was so effective. And I thought, well, if I can do this with the couples that come to me, we can do this on a larger scale. And why do I say be your own therapist? Because I want to teach people skills that they don't need me. That's what I'm trying to do. Give you all the skills, the best I know, and teach you those and work with you how to learn those and use those in a practical way. Then you don't need me. Now, people like that. They don't want to be in therapy for years and years and years. They want to give me something I can do, let me learn it, and then I can use it myself.
That's great. That makes a lot of sense. So, let me ask you this. So if so we have some people watching this, we're also going to put this on social media. A lot of people will end up seeing this. Do you, if somebody wants to contact you, if they're interested in your counseling services, if they're interested in your workshops, if they're interested in, or your seminars, they're interested maybe in ordering your book, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you or to find you?
Well, I have a website, CatherineBurton.com, Catherine Burton blog.com. And you can look me up and Google me. I'm in Psychology Today. And I'm on the internet quite a bit. There's a lot of things on me
And it's
about
Catherine with a C, right?
CATH.
Catherine with a C.
Uh-huh. And you can find me if you just Google me. It'll be right there. The book will be right there. You can get it on Amazon. And if you want an appointment, then there's phone numbers you can call or text. I use text a lot.
Okay, guys.
Email.
So it's Catherine Burton, Catherine with a C. You can find her all over the internet. And so if you are interested in her counseling services or her book or her seminars, please reach out to her. And thank you so much for joining us today. This was very enlightening. There's a million questions I could probably ask, but we don't want to, drift off into crazy territory. But thank you guys for joining us, and we'll hope to see you soon. Okay, bye-bye.